When time is tight, fast assembly food is great, but on housebound rainy weekends, I want to savour a little domestic warmth and enjoy some laid-back stove-side pottering for a change. Pasta and meatballs are what I make when I want to shimmer into Italian mama mode. It's time consuming, but I don't apologise for that here simply because there's no point in making fresh pasta or meatballs unless you really want to enjoy the process and sort of throw yourself into the activity. And actually, making fresh pasta is not hard at all. I think too often in cooking especially, people fail to make the distinction between time-consuming and difficult. This isn't difficult at all, it just takes a while. It's fiddly. Right, I've got 400 grams of 00 flour here. You can get 00 flour, which is very finely milled, makes incredibly elastic dough. At supermarkets now, that's easy. And all you need to remember with fresh pasta is that for each 100 grams of flour, you have one egg, and that one egg, as you call it, of pasta, makes enough for 2 people quite generously. Bit of salt. I'm going to get my eggs. Now I prefer making this just the way they do in Italy normally. Just pile the flour on a board and then just crack the eggs onto it. Makes a mess, but that's fine. But this is sort of hands-on and fun, and that's the whole point of this. This is my 4th egg. And then just mix these together. And knead until you've got a ball of dough. And you'll see the change here. At the moment it's just a mess. The kneading of pasta dough is the same as bread dough. In other words, you're pushing out with the heel of your hand and bringing it back either with your fingers or again with the heel of your hand. And what it is that you're bringing your body heat to work on the gluten and the flour. So it's rather wonderful. It's sort of cooking that's a real collaboration between you and the food. Now it's more or less ready. You can see it's quite smooth and I can form it into a ball very easily. It's so soft, like a baby's bottom. You can just cover it in cling film, but somehow it doesn't fit my mood today, so I'm going to... When I make fresh pasta, I'm more in a kind of tea towel mood. 30 minutes will do it. You just have to rest a bit before you start turning it into pasta strips. But if you wanted to, you could leave it in the fridge for a couple of hours. I mean, properly covered, 3 days would be fine. Rainy day cookery is to some extent store cupboard cookery, and I know everyone nowadays quite justifiably makes a big deal out of fresh herbs, but dried herbs, can be incredibly useful, and some of them are wonderful. Parsley and basil, not so great, but dried mint is wonderful. It doesn't have the sprightliness of fresh mint, but it does really have a wonderful smoky redolence. Thyme, I suppose because it's quite oily, really works well when it's dried and you get the full hit of the herb. And oregano I use a lot when it's dried, and it's really, well, I suppose when the weather's like this you need a bit of summer in your food. Right, the meatballs again, this is easy work. Takes some time, but that's no problem. I've got here 250 grams of minced pork, same weight of minced beef. You can alter the meats to suit you. Often I do just beef, sometimes I might put a bit of veal in. You're just using this as a blueprint. To this I always add some grated parmesan. I suppose if I'm going to measure it, which I'm not, I'd say it's about 2 tablespoons, but it's just enough to give a sort of savoury depth. Now, an egg. This helps bind the mixture. And the same is true really as semolina, which helps give a bit of bulk. In fact, bread is normal, but I didn't have any bread for breadcrumbs one day, so I added some semolina. And I now find I love that sort of wheaten sweetness such a lot. I always use this. 3 spoonfuls oregano, whatever herb you add, I mean, is up to you. Most normally I do fresh parsley, and I suppose I wanted to change it. Salt, quite a bit. You want the seasoning to be sort of full on. And pepper. Garlic. If you want to add onion as well, do. And it's really just a question of mixing all this together and then forming them into little balls. Now, you do need to be a bit patient to make them small enough, because actually it's much nicer when you have meatballs with pasta to have them really about a teaspoonful. Right, this is the base for the tomato sauce. Onion, garlic, oregano. So get a bit of oil, not extra virgin, just ordinary. And this for me is incredibly important. Some butter. I find cooking tomato sauce in butter, at least some butter, really adds a mellow note and cuts any acidity, and tomatoes can be very acidic. So while that warms, I'm going to scrape this in. This will take, I don't know, 5 minutes. What I want is it to cook down and be soft. I don't want any crispiness or colouring. Some salt. Right, so that's lovely and soft and sort of cooked to a wonderful soused pulp. So tomato passata, that's just sort of liquidised tomatoes really. I always add a bit of water to this, otherwise it just gets too thick and too intense. Bit of sugar. Sweet though tomatoes are, often you need a teeny bit of help. Pepper. Teeny bit of salt, not too much, because I did add the salt earlier, and anyway, you can always taste later. And then, if I can find a lid, I'm just going to partially cover the pan, just to let it sort of cook for about 10 minutes, and then I can get back and add the milk. Put it in there and maybe we'll turn the handle. There we are. Okay, Mimi, you start. That's good. Now, well done. More pasta. That's lovely.
That's the red one. That's my turn.
That's good. Right, we're on the home run. Just add some milk. I learnt this trick of putting milk in sauces in Bologna, and it makes a real difference. It makes it look rather like cream of tomato soup, but nothing wrong in that. Right, now the meatballs. It's quite important not to stir these and break them up as you're adding them. Just drop them gently into the sauce. Right, so the meatballs are in. I'm going to put the lid on again partially, so the meatballs will cook, the sauce will thicken, and in 20 minutes, we're ready. There you are, there's some parmesan if you want. That's yours, sweetheart. Okay. There you are. Twist it round, darling. The whole point for me of rainy day cooking is that you're going to make something you would never normally have time for. And trifle is really that sort of food, not least because there are so many stages. It's not that any of them are hard, it's just that you've got to be hanging around and you've got to want to linger around the kitchen a bit. And this trifle is a raspberry and lemongrass one. And the first stage in my particular trifle is to make a syrup. And I've done this simply by boiling 600 mils of water with 325 grams of caster sugar and 3 large stalks of lemongrass, and I just brought that to the boil, let it bubble away, and then let it sit with all the flavours infusing for a while. A wonderful kind of sharp sweet syrup. So I have enough syrup there for many things in this trifle. The first of which is cooking the raspberries, because I want to do a trifle which has fresh fruit, not jam. And I'm going to use some of this syrup and all of these raspberries, about 300 grams, to make a really sort of luscious, fresh raspberry sauce to dunk sponges in, and that will be like the first fruity layer. Okay, so I have here, I don't know, about 150 mils, 200 mils of this syrup. And what happens is that the raspberries kind of explode and melt into the syrup as you bring it up to boil. It doesn't take that long. I mean, it's, of course you could use just jam, but the point here is that you have a really intensely fresh tasting raspberry sauce. I mean, it kind of reminds me of the sort of jam you imagine would be eaten in sandwiches on kind of Enid Blyton picnics. That looks perfect, my gorgeous ruby syrup. And let it cool a bit, because although I don't mind being a bit reckless, even I don't want to dip my hands into boiling sugar. And then once this is cooled a bit, I can just dunk my sponges in and begin my layering. Now, I'm just using bought trifle sponges. Now, I know a lot of people find that if anything is out of a packet, it's somehow not to be contemplated. I actually think a bought trifle sponge is the best thing in the trifle. It's rather wonderful the way it soaks up all this red fruity liquid. It's difficult to say how much you'll need. I mean, I've got 2 boxes worth, about 16 sponges there, because the whole point about trifle is it's not always helpful to give measurements, because what you want to do is see by eye, because it's about layers. So really, you just have to you stop when you've got the layer you want. Right, last one. Very raspberried. And now the next layer, which will become into this layer as well. Some vodka. Now the reason I'm using vodka for this is for no other reason than I want nothing to interfere with this beautiful raspberry colour. Up to you how much, it's about 3 spoonfuls. That'll soak down. And so will a bit of syrup. So if I just... Not too much, you don't want to waterlog it, but what I'm just going to get on with now is the cream for the custard, which I want similarly flavoured. So I've kept these bits of lemongrass and just stick over a pot of single cream, bring it to the boil, let it stand off the heat for, 20 minutes. Just make the custard and just simply then pour the cool custard over the set fruity sponges, and then on top of that some whipped cream, and then something which I will finish up what I have here by boiling it down into a wonderful sort of toffee-like lemon syrup, and then just drizzle it over. Right, I'm using 8 egg yolks, 75 grams of sugar. So whisk this into the egg yolks. Pour in my infused cream and whisk it in. Lovely. So pour this in. I want this to be wonderfully rich and thick. Royal custard. Right, so I've let the trifle chill a bit, so this custard now is nice and firm, which will support this whipped cream. And this goes piled on top. I don't like it whipped too thickly. Just the whole thing is more dreamily voluptuous when it's like this. Look at that. And then, final stage, the lemongrass syrup. Look, I've just reduced it so it's like a toffee. And a bit of drizzling on top. And now, really, all you need to do is find some quiet space and dive in. When it's cold and I want some warming inside, this is the book I turn to, English Food by Jane Gregson. It's got just the sort of things you want to read about. You want to eat, but reading about it is often fine. To make a goose pie, steak, kidney and oyster pudding, and it's got full of my notes and everything because I just have never been able to stop reading this book. And I love this one too, Gastronomy of Italy by Anna Del Conte. And I suppose in a way I think of it as, you know, like a travel brochure in culinary form. But it's also the case it is the most comprehensive guide, so that you want to cook something Italian, this is where you look first. Another wonderful escapist volume. Classic home desserts, you know, sort of food you want to eat, but try not to eat. Of course, I don't always manage that struggle, but still, lovely, comforting, warming puddings. And this is one of my favourites, chocolate cow cake, which I've kind of fiddled with and done various versions. And this is the perfect sort of thing to cook when you want to potter about the kitchen. It's absorbing, but not too demanding. I mean, in fact, this is very easy altogether. It's mostly stirring with a bit of whisking, which I do mechanically. So I've melted some chocolate here. It's 250 grams, really wonderful dark chocolate. It's had a few minutes in a medium microwave, which I think is the easiest way. This is some lovely soft butter, unsalted. So I just need 125 grams of this, so half the packet. And the idea is, you know, put it in the chocolate, which is warm, and it will just melt into it. And then after it's melted, I'm just going to leave it there to cool slightly before adding it to the cake. Great. It'll be fine. Let's leave it there. Right. This is a flourless chocolate cake, which I think is the best sort. And so what you have, also to give it heft and rise, is eggs. So I need 4 egg whites. I need these yolks, so I'll put them here. I find it easier to whisk the whites first, simply because then I have everything ready. The whites are there, I just have to get on with the rest of the cake and fold them in and we're off. Flourless cakes are also quite good because they're more convincing as puddings, I think, than an ordinary, you know, English flour cake. In fact, this cake I did for pudding for my New Year's Eve dinner last year. Last one. What I need to do is whisk these whites until they're sort of well and frothy, and then gradually add some sugar. Right, I need 100 grams of sugar. That's about in between 6 and 7 of these. Just spoonful by spoonful. Caster sugar. What I want is for the whites to be firm and glossy, but not stiff or dry. There, that looks great. Oh, peace at last. It's like that blissful moment when people stop playing bagpipes. Great! Now I'm going to get on this. You'll see how easy this is. I've got the 4 yolks here, and so I'll just have 2 whole eggs. There's always something very satisfying about a recipe which uses a whole carton of eggs, I find. Okay, now sugar, 75 grams, 5 of these. Tablespoon in baking always means a 15 spoon, or think of it as 3 teaspoons. Okay, a quick whisk. You could use a wooden spoon, frankly. That's what's rather nice about this. It isn't laborious, should we say. And now, zest of an orange. I mean, you don't have to add this, it's just if you feel like it. I mean, I don't always like orange with chocolate, but I think here it seems to work very well. I think that the chocolate is so intense and the egg whites make it so light that it somehow just gives a third dimension. Now going further along the orange route, bit of Cointreau. And again, I use this because I do always have a stash of this, but there's no need to get it specially for this. You could use rum, which is always delicious, Kahlua, Frangelico, I mean, list is endless. Or if you want to add nothing in the way of liqueur and no orange, I think a bit of vanilla is probably a good idea. Okay, very, very nearly there now. Just pour in the chocolate and butter mixture. Mix that in. And then the whites. Now, when you fold in whites, it's easiest always if you start off by giving a dollop, a spoonful, into the basic mixture and whisking really vigorously. Don't be scared, just completely beat it in, because this will make the kind of base mixture much lighter and it'll make it much easier then to fold in the egg whites. You won't have to whisk all the air out of them. Now we don't want that whisk. Okay, now you need to be a patient person for folding. I'm not particularly, but I think somehow it's always better not to be scared of egg whites. I know that the idea is you've got to be gentle and not get any air out, but if you're too scared, I think somehow it does sometimes permeate its way into the cooking. I think you just have to relax and it will go better. So look, I'm just folding in light, lifting it up so the air stays in, but you know, no need to exaggerate. And that's it. And then all that remains to be done is to pour it into the tin. Don't grease the tin, completely dry, but just put some baking parchment at the base. Beautiful. Leave yourself some in the bowl for eating out later. And the thing about these flourless cakes, you know, which have egg whites as their raising agent, is that they rise really quite a lot, quite radically on baking, and then as they cool they sink damply in the middle, and that's what makes them so delicious, and it's absolutely fabulous. Anyway, you've got to be baked now. The oven's preheated at 180. It's about 35-40 minutes, so in the oven. Don't be alarmed at how just cratery and splintery it gets. It's meant to be like that, and the whole point is this crater that you'll get will be filled with a softly whipped cream just with a bit of Cointreau added to match the Cointreau in the base, and then dusted with some cocoa.